and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. We are here for a Week 14 review in the 2023 NFL season. I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davies, and this week I'm joined by a returning guest. With me today is Titans fan Greg Kett. Greg, first of all, how are you? How have you been?
Hi, Andy. Yeah, all good. Can't really complain. Got 3 hours sleep last night, but I can sleep on 3 hours when the Titans win a game because we have not had many of them this year. So especially on the road to Miami, I don't think anyone was expecting that. Certainly not you.
Certainly not me. I mean, I know we're going to talk about later on. I remember we talked on DM about a week ago when we were planning this podcast, and I think we said that, oh yeah, it'll be over by halftime. We'll win this game easily. And I certainly thought that, certainly after the Washington game, and then what's happened in that game, the loss we had to Titans. I think it's could be a really damaging result for us. So yeah, not certainly what I expected when I watched that game.
No, it was a strange one in regard. The, our secondary this year has been annihilated by receivers that are certainly not the level of the likes of Tyreek Hill and Waddle and the weapons that you've got there, and even the guys out of the backfield who offer a hell of a lot. But it was just one of those games where you're able to move the ball to a certain extent, but just couldn't really put points on the board. And it took, I can't remember exactly what it was. I mean, obviously your first touchdown was in the fourth quarter, and that came from a short field. But it just seems defense, we just absolutely shut it down. And even though there were still big chunk plays that Miami were getting, the Titans just hung in there. And the blocked field goal, I think it was in the first half. Danico Autry, who's been incredible for us since we picked him up from the Colts. I wouldn't say he's a special teams player. He's very much a prominent starter on that defensive line, but making a special teams play, which is after the week that we've had on special teams with our punter going down for the year and our special teams coordinator being fired, it's good to see some special teams play coming in more in our favour until the fourth quarter. That was with the muffed punt. So yeah, it was one of those games which I think I said to you prior to the game, it was a case of, how many would Miami win by? I think that was really what I was expecting it to be, just I say over by halftime, comfortable win. But yeah, wasn't to be.
Yeah, I mean, the game just finished. We might as well get into it now. I mean, finished 28-27 to the Titans. Looking at the quick stats, Levis had 327 yards, 23 completions from 38 attempts, one touchdown, one pick. Tua had 23 completions from 33 attempts, 240 yards, no touchdowns or picks. Derrick Henry led the way with 34 rushing yards for Titans, two touchdowns. D-Hop had one touchdown, 124 yards receiving. TJ Spears had 89 yards receiving as well. Waddle had 79 yards, no touchdown. Moster had 96 yards, two touchdowns. But I think for me, the first half was I think for me wild because I forgot about the block kick from Sanders. But I think you look at also the fact that we got to the red zone, we sort of fumbled the ball, gave the ball away to you guys. But then within minutes and within a few plays, Levis throws a pick six. That was our first play of the game. And there was the incident towards the end of the first half. Obviously, the Tyreek Hill injury was proved to be, I think, really crucial towards the game, and he came back late in the game. But I think at that point, and I know he's on the field, but I think there was a lot of problems we had even before. I think we could have really killed the game off if he was there. And that's one thing I will say in positive about the season. If he does play next week and rest of the season, I think we're absolutely fine. But I think we've got to worry about when he wasn't there, just how badly we looked. And yeah, also there was the incident, the Bradley Chubb incident, which looking back at now, obviously a lot more happened than just this. But we managed to get to fourth down. I can't think whether you would field goal range or whether you could punt it away. But either way, it was a great stop, and he chucked his helmet on the floor, goes back to first down for you guys, and you score. I think within two plays of that happening. So I think a lot of mistakes from both teams in that first half, and but in second half, you go into it, and third quarter was pretty much. I don't think any points were scored. If I'm right, maybe I don't know. But then the fourth quarter, we get that break through the fumble from your punt returner. We get two touchdowns quickly through Mostert, and then that last 3 minutes, first time in NFL history that a team has been with 3 minutes left on the game clock, 14 points down, and they've won the game. And the thing I want to talk about mainly was for you, just how crucial was that 2 point conversion attempt and completion, successful completion from a call from Vable to do it, and just how crucial was that for you in the final result?
It was crucial for obviously being 14 points down. We were either going to have to get the 2 points then or get the 2 points on the second touchdown if we wanted to try and win that game or minimum force overtime. I think it showed a mentality of Vrabel wasn't here for overtime. Which is not the first time that we've seen him do that. We haven't seen him do it for a while. He's usually a little bit more I wouldn't say it's not a case of not trusting his team. I think it's more a case of, we just don't really want to have to go through overtime, and getting that 2 point conversion opened up the opportunity. But even after we got the 2 point conversion, I wasn't expecting to see the ball again. I was fully expecting that Miami would have enough on offense to wind the clock down and eventually get it to knees. But it was just an unbelievable last 3 minutes of that game. After what I'll call combustion, I guess, of that in that fourth quarter, starting with the muffed punt, which has been a problem for the Titans for probably 2 or 3 years now at least. We've not had a punt returner who I wince every single time we're returning punts, and which was a similar story of our kickers for the last few years until this year at least. That was a huge moment, and you saw on the sideline Eric Garror with Mike Vrabel sort of discussing it, and it was a game changing moment. And then to follow that up with a fumble, obviously Levis with the handoff or the sort of toss back to Henry didn't quite get it right, caused a fumble, and look, the only touchdowns that Miami scored, the Miami offense scored yesterday, came from those short field positions, and you can't do that in this league and expect to win games. But the last 3 minutes was just almost surgical. It was some of the best that I've seen from Levis. Some of the best. We know that we're very deficient in talent when it comes to the receiver position. We're very reliant on DeAndre Hopkins. He's still showing that he has it, even at in the early 30s. Everyone was kind of wrote him off after he was let go by the Cardinals. No one really wanted to pick up a piece of him. He's been by far and away our best receiver this year. And we did enough with the likes of Tajay Spears. Has been an incredible pickup for us in the draft. Someone who, I was quite critical of the pick. I really wanted a wide receiver, and then we found out we drafted a running back who's got no ACL. You're not thinking he's going to really be able to make any kind of impact, but he's been unbelievable, and someone who you can build a foundation. If Henry is to move on after this year, he's certainly a player that I think is an exciting player that we can get even more out of in the years to come. But it was just surgical. It was just one of those games that you wouldn't expect the Titans to kind of win under those circumstances. 14 points down with 3 minutes. There's not many teams that come back from that, but an incredible performance, both on offense and defense. Obviously, the defense, Harold Landry, who's been out with an ACL injury, came back this year, had a really slow start to the year, which is to be expected, but coming up with big play right at the end on fourth down, and had a great game overall. It's good. It felt like the Titans of old, the Titans of a few years ago, who would go into places like Miami and a team that's performing incredibly well, high-powered offense, good defense, and go and turn them over. And that's exactly what it kind of felt like. And we've not had many of those. It's our first away win in over a year. I think it was November 2022, the last time we won an away game. So for us, it's a huge win, even though a lot of fans will be complaining about the fact that they want a top 5 draft pick. I'll take a win, especially when you're staying up until 5 a.m. in the morning to watch it.
Yeah, certainly. I think you've been rewarded for all those late nights that you've had. I think there's to be a UK fan of a team that isn't performing well and you playing these late games, I think it makes it even better staying up if you can win the game. I think that I'm 2019, and we mentioned off camera that I'm a guy that tends to record the late games and watch them the next morning, not knowing the result. I'm sure there's plenty of Dolphins fans in that 2019 season that would have been staying up for these late games and not getting any reward. But I think this game, I think has massive implications for the AFC seeding in general. I think first of all, as you mentioned, I'm surprised we didn't kill that game off when you scored. I think that with fact that our two touchdowns offensively came from running the ball. I'm so surprised we didn't get enough first downs. And yeah, it's a real strange one because this team's been so good this year at closing out games, or a lot of time. To be fair, a lot of time the game's done by the third quarter. So I think it's. I think I'd rather get this game done now out of the way rather than do it in the playoffs. I think there's definitely you'd rather have these error-prone games now, but at the same time, we've proved to be a lot better at home, and this game could completely kill that because not only are we now the second seed, we have a chance to go back to the number one overall seed. We can still win out and beat the Ravens. We'll still get top seed. That will be fine. But if it comes down to one game we missed out on, I think we'll look back at this Titans game, and because you don't really, it's not really shocked to lose to the Bills, the Eagles, and the Chiefs, but that is a shock, a loss that no one had us having. We think we had the biggest. Titans think we're the largest underdogs pre-game, pre-week
Yeah.
14. So no one thought we'd lose that game, and I think with the Bills, we'll mention that in a bit, but the Bills beating the Chiefs, only 2 wins behind us, and they got to play the Cowboys next, so have we. But their schedule, apart from that, apart from playing us in that final week of the season, is I think they got the Chargers and then the Patriots. I think so.
Mm.
They've got a much more favorable. Well, we got the Ravens, and Cowboys, and the Bills. So I think it could well come down to that final game, and I'm hoping that the Bills do lose to the Cowboys. Maybe they lose to the Chargers, or something. But it could well come to that final week, which could be my birthday, incidentally. It could come down to that final week, and it could be just the most nerve-wracking of games. And considering Liverpool Arsenal's on the same day, potentially that would be the most horrible of sport days for me, or potentially great sport days, how it goes. But yeah, and
Well,
I think that we're a team that's proved to be before this game we were 5-0 at home, and we really want that home advantage. And I think that even if we get it, say wild card round, if we do win the division, then if we get third or fourth seed, we're liking you playing either the Chiefs or the Ravens away from home, and that is really not an easy feat. Whereas if you were home for those games, we've been beating the Ravens twice in recent years. Actually, one was away, but even so, you want to play those teams at home, and I think to play the Ravens and the Chiefs, two of the hardest grounds to go to. I think in the NFL, I think
mm,
we could look back if we lose those games in the wild card round or divisional round to one of these two teams, and I think that it's you've got to look at it and probably look back at this game and the Jets game if you lose that next week as well. I think we'll look back at that game and think that what could have been, and I know you guys had the same thing. You probably look back at that 2021 season thinking, what if you beaten the Bengals that day? Tannehill hadn't thrown about a zillion interceptions that day. And I think that the window's so tight in the NFL, and with Ray Ramsey, he's no spring chicken. Tyreek Hill said he wants to retire in 2025. Terran Armstead is our best lineman, but he's never healthy. He'll probably retire in a few years. Xavier Howard's not getting younger, not getting any better either. So the window for us is really now, and I think that I still have my reservation that was to it is the guy to win your championship. I think it's more about the other guys, but I do think that if you get to the time when all these players like Ramsey and Hill retire, it gets to that point, and Tua is there and he's playing like he is now. I think that will probably be a team that finishes has a lot of 8 and 9 seasons, 9 and 8, 10 and a lot of good seasons, but not good enough to win championship, but not bad enough to win any high
yeah.
draft picks. So I think there's definitely a thing of we have to try and win now, whether it's this year or next year. But I think I have to worry about as if we do lose one of these games on the road and we could have played them at home. I think that could be a game that we look back on with massive regret. But either way, you got to also praise the Titans. I think it's a really good performance from them defensively. I mean, to make those stops when you were only 6 points behind, I think was really big. And then the whole first half, I mean, getting those important plays when he needed to. I think it's a really real testament to Mike Vrabel and his team who has struggled for a lot of this year. And I think that it's certainly then one that will give you confidence, I think, down the stretch and going into next season as well. That you can go on and beat these teams and have a good season. I think that Levis has shown, albeit in patches, I think Levis has shown for me that he can be the quarterback for you guys. And I do feel like now you've got Spears. He proved to be Derrick Henry's replacement. I think you've got a running back there for the future now as well. And yeah, I think obviously Hopkins is old, but Burks has shown at times he can do it, but not quite all the time yet. So I think there's definitely potential there, and I think you have to be positive about what the future holds for your team.
I'll be I'll start with just one point I wanted to make on Miami, and we talked about the injury to Tyreek. it almost felt like a completely different offense when he went off the field, which I get. I know how important he is to the way that Miami play, and what I wasn't expecting. I still think the Dolphins have got other weapons. They've got good players. They've got players like Waddle, for example. I was expecting him just to be the kind of main target, but it just felt like once Tyreek went down, I know they tried to bring him in on a couple of plays, and he was there in that sort of, I think it might have been the fourth quarter or the third quarter when he came in for a few plays. He was there mostly as a bit of a decoy for a shot down the field for A-Chain, which he couldn't quite get. But it was one of those ones where as soon as he went off the field, I was amazed by the drop off. I wasn't expecting it to be as steep as it was. Because I agree with you. I think in terms of that window for Miami, it's going to be interesting to see. They've got to pay Tua at some point in the very near future, and that then automatically makes it harder for you to kind of accumulate talent unless you do it in the draft to go and replace someone like Tyreek if he is to retire in 25. But for the Titans, this year, I mean, I don't know where we're ranking in terms of points allowed from a defense perspective, but there's not many games that we go and concede 30 plus points. And we are, the defense can be quite stingy. The thing is with the defense, it's always been a bend, don't break kind of defense. They'll give up a big play, get it into the red zone, but then hold them in the red zone to a field goal. And that's exactly what we saw last night to a certain extent. Is the defense, they gave up some of those big plays. They gave up some poor penalties. Murphy Bunting with a pass interference, I think it was in the second half, got the Dolphins all the way down to within the 10. But the one thing with the Titans, you're going to get in the red zone is a very, very stingy defense. And that's been the same for many, many years. But we were missing our best defensive player last night. Jeffrey Simmons missing last night was huge for the Titans. He has been the heartbeat of the defense for the last few years. But I was expecting Mostert and A-Chain to kind of run all over the defensive line, but they held firm. The likes of Pecco, who went out injured as well, which was another loss. Autry, those guys on the inside there. Tier Tart is another one that probably doesn't get talked about enough, but they absolutely, the success that Miami got when the run game was bouncing it outside, and you'll take that all day long because you've got to run parallel before you can make any ground. So you're only really going to be getting 4 or 5 yard gains rather than big chunk plays. And it was just one of those games, as I say, it was like the Titans of old. It's like the Titans that we saw back in 2019 season when we made that sort of playoff run, even to the 2021 season to a certain extent, winning the games that no one really expected us to win. It felt like the Titans of old, and it has definitely started to get better in the last couple of weeks. There's been some poor performances this season. I've been sat in the grounds for some of them, but it's one of those things with the Titans is I can see there's a direction that we're starting to head in, and Will Levis was someone I wasn't particularly enamored about when we drafted him. Pre-draft, I was very much against that move, but he's 100% selling it to me. He could be that franchise guy. He's just fearless. You saw him running over Jalen Ramsey last night after avoiding the sack from Bradley Chubb. That's the sort of quarterback that you want. Who's just going to put a team on your back, but he's got the arm talent, and all he needs now is the experience to continue to grow. He could be that franchise quarterback that the Titans haven't had. We've had many people we thought were going to be that guy, like some Mariota, like some Vince Young, Jake Locker, but he's the one that I've been most excited about for what feels like a very, very long time. As long as they can build the offense around him, fix the offensive line, there's massive problems there. Give him some weapons. We need to draft well there. Because you said about Traylon Burks, unfortunately, it hasn't worked out with Traylon through mostly down to injuries, but he hasn't shown he was and I know it's hard to say he's a replacement for AJ Brown, but ultimately that was what the trade was. The trade was, giving up AJ Brown for Traylon Burks, and it's not been anywhere near the level that AJ brought to the Titans and has done continually also for the Eagles. So it's not worked out. But if we draft well and we use free agency well, we've got a lot of cap space this coming off season. There's a lot to fix, but if Ran Carthon and Vrabel can get it right, it could be a quick turnaround. which I wasn't thinking weeks ago it was going to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, yeah, certainly a lot to be excited about. And you mentioned then not being in the stands. I mean, I believe it's 4 games you've been to this year. You went to the game in London and you went to America. You saw him play in Tampa, Jacksonville, and Tennessee. Is that right? Those 4 games?
Yeah, I was out in September as well for 2 games. So I've been out for, including London, I think it'll be 6 games this year.
Amazing. How's that been
Yeah, so
going to America? I know you've done it before, but how's that been this year to watch your team play in what's mostly been some quite hot places?
yeah, absolutely. It's been a challenge this year, if I'm honest with you. I mean, some of the games we've been to have been really poor at times. New Orleans week one was not a classic. It was a bit of a field goal fest. That was the game where I kind of was convinced that certainly Tannehill's time was at an end. I just didn't, unfortunately, had a horror show that day. Been to Nashville for a couple of games, but the games that the home that we won, beat the Chargers. It was a really close game, and beat the Panthers, which was a lot closer than it probably should have been. It's been a mixed bag, but the games in Florida, yeah, I mean, I've come away with sunburn and 2 losses in Jacksonville and Tampa. Unfortunately, it kind of it comes with the territory. When you're a Titans fan, you have to accept them sometimes. But yeah, we've had some bad days at the office, and the Baltimore game in London was a fine example of that. Really, it was one of those games that we stuck around. It wasn't a complete blowout, but you never felt like the team were going to be able to take the game by the scruff of the neck and get anything out of it, unlike what we saw last night. So, but yeah, we love going over. It's something we do every year. We usually go sort of 2-3 times a year. If we're lucky enough to be in the playoffs, we'll head over for that as well. But that will save us a few quid this year, because I think it's like 1% chance for still reaching the playoffs. But hopefully we can finish the season on a high, continue with the positive momentum into next year.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've been to games, but I was very jealous that you got to go to those games. And I know you mentioned before, but obviously your other half has been converted to be a Titans fan as well. So it must be a nice thing to do as a couple, really, to just to have these times. Obviously, experience as a holiday as well as going to the games. You can see a lot of Florida and all that. So yeah, I think there's definitely best thing about America probably is that you can do a lot more than just watch games there. There's so much you can do there. So it must be a nice excuse to see the country.
What's great about America is wherever you go in the country, it's everything's just so different. You go along the south, went to New Orleans, a completely different city to if you go out to the west coast, or if you go on the east coast or down to Florida, the climates are completely different. I mean, you can go to Florida now and get 25, 30-degree heat. You can go to Green Bay and it'd be minus 25. So it's one of those places. Obviously, it's such a vast country. You can use the same trip, go to a few different places and experience completely different cities, completely different cultures, and that's what we love to do. We normally try and do at least 1 or 2 games on the road, and then we'll always go back to Nashville for 1 or 2 as well, because it's good to experience new places and new cities. And there's some cities you'll say you'll never go back to again. There's some cities you then want to go back to again and again. But yeah, we always end up spending a lot of time in Nashville. It's become almost like a second home for us.
Yeah, I mean Nashville. I know we mentioned before, but I absolutely love Nashville, and I definitely plan to go back when the new stadium's built and try and see what that's like and go back. But I remember my friend and I we went to in the space of 2 weeks went to New York, Dallas, and LA. Couldn't have picked 3 more different places than that. I mean, it's yeah, I think when my friend it's first time in America, I think he got the full range of American culture. I mean, you mentioned Green Bay there. The other game last night, there's 2 games on at the same time. The Giants beat the Green Bay Packers by 24 points to 22 at MetLife Stadium. But moving back to the start of the week, the Pittsburgh Steelers lost to the Patriots by 21 points to 18 on Thursday Night Football. Heading on to the 6 p.m. slate on Sunday, the Buccaneers beat the Falcons in a big NFC South game by 29 points to 25. The Colts lost to the Bengals 34 points to 14. The Lions had a shock loss to the Bears by 28 points to 13. The Saints beat the Panthers at home 28 to 6. The Jets beat the Texans at home, which is another shock result, 30 points to 6. And probably the best game of the week, arguably, maybe the second best after last night. The Ravens beat the Rams 37 to 31 in overtime, and they scored from a punt return for a touchdown and now firmly secure the number one seed in the AFC. But going from one of the best games to the worst game of the week, it was 0-0 in the fourth quarter in Vegas as the Vikings beat the Raiders by 3 points to zero. Statistically, the worst game of NFL football in 16 years, the lowest score since I think it was Patriots Dolphins, sorry, Steelers Dolphins in 2007. But either way, not a great game to watch. And I really want to ask you not about the game itself. I think the game itself is really not worth talking about. But what would you say, Greg? I want to ask you, what is the worst game of NFL football you've ever seen, whether it's on TV or in person? What is the worst game you've ever seen? Is is this one on
Oh,
Sunday? Is
it's,
that it?
I mean, it's got to be up there. I mean, even the week before with the Chargers and Patriots game, I think that was at 6-0, and um, I'll go down the Titans route with this one. We played the Jags back in, I think it was 2018, quite early on in the season. We beat them 9-6, and it was a game where Marcus Mariota was playing for us. He got injured, and Blaine Gabbert came in as quarterback. Obviously, there was just 5 field goals in it. We're up against Blake Bortles. I don't think either quarterback threw for more than sort of 150 yards, if memory serves me right. That's definitely one I remember watching, thinking, Jesus Christ, I just want this game over with. It was obviously we wanted to win, and we did win, which was I was never going to complain about, but it was pretty poor to watch. But I mean, that's probably not as bad as what we saw on Sunday. I think that Vikings game is going to be hard to beat for some time. I think there's watching. I mean, I normally watch Red Zone on a Sunday, and it was just one of those games where they kept going back to it, hoping something might happen, and then it'd be a turnover or whatever it might be, and it was just one of those games that no one's going to be watching the highlights for. I'd be surprised if we can find any highlights, to be honest with you.
Do you know what surprised me actually? YouTube, the NFL YouTube channel has an 11-minute highlights package of this game. I couldn't believe that, especially when the Steelers, no, the one last week was the Patriots Chargers 7 minutes long. So I don't know how they got 11 minutes out of that game. They must have, I don't know what it is. I remember the years ago there was a Charlton game where the highlights package was literally a minute long. It was insane. But yeah, no, I think the one thing that I think has in its favour is that at least it was tight. Whereas the one I've gone for is a game that was extremely one-sided, which I think actually I'd rather a game be 3 points low scoring than a 30, 40 point blowout if you're neutral. So that's why I've gone for the worst game I've ever watched. I'm going for the Super Bowl between the Broncos and the Seahawks, where the Seahawks won 43-8. I just think that for that game, for me, the game is so much hype going into it, a lot of expectation. It's in New York, Peyton Manning, Russell Wilson, all these things. And then first play, Manning takes safety after a botch snap. And I think that I'd much rather watch that Patriots Rams one where it was 13-3 because at least that was tight. Whereas games where it's one sided and it's over by halftime, I think no one wants to watch that because it's over and done with. So yeah, that's one I've gone
Yeah.
for.
I've got there's a couple of examples. I mean, I went to a game. I watched the Titans play in Houston back in I think it was 2017. We lost. It's 57-14, I think it was. That was pretty depressing. But the one game I always remember, if you're talking about one-sided, complete blowout, 2009, I think it was, just before Christmas, the Titans lost 59-0 to the Patriots.
I think I've seen that on
It
YouTube.
was
Yeah.
there's a well-known meme of a Titans fan wearing a Christmas hat, looking entirely depressed, that still gets floated about here and there. So yeah, the Titans had some dark days in that regard. That's if you're talking about one-sided and not entertaining purely for that purpose, then absolutely. I was kind of going more by the just lack of quality, which is why I kind of chose the game, and that's kind of what you saw with that Vikings game. But yeah, like you say, it was close. It could have, if there could have been some entertainment in the last few minutes that changed that game. But yeah, one-sided blowouts are never fun to watch, certainly if you're a neutral.
No. I gotta say, on talking of our own teams, I think I genuinely might have this game last night as my least favorite Dolphins game of all time because most years I'm used to the team not winning games and not doing well. I mean, I've only seen this play 2 playoff games in my whole life. I'm used to the team which I expect to lose a lot of these games in the past, but it's a hope that kills you as a saying I'll use for this because I think the other game I can think of probably played the Broncos in the 2020 year. I think we got 10 wins that whole year and didn't make the playoffs, which is crazy. Getting double-digit wins and not making the playoffs. And I think that Broncos game we're on a good enough form and it sort of broke that momentum a little bit. But I think this game for me, I think, could be looked back in a few years as one of my least favorite, because if it is as what's the word? If it is as consequential as I'm thinking it might be for the season, I might look back at this game as my least favorite ever, because most years, you're 3-3 by week 6, or you're 0-5 by week 5. So for me, yeah, it's the one season where I've had a lot of hope, and I'm seeing this team actually win a lot of games, and I'm not used to losing at the moment. So for me, this might be up there. Now moving on from the Vikings Raiders game to the other games that went on. The latest slate saw the 49ers beat the Seahawks by 28-16 and surely wrap up the NFC West. The Broncos beat the lowly Chargers 24-7. And then the last two games we want to focus on, first of all, is Bills Chiefs, 20 points to 17 win for the Bills. But the main talking point was the offside call. I mean, we got what would have been one of the all-time great plays when Kelsey threw a lateral pass to Tony, ran for a touchdown. We all thought, right, that's going to win them the game. Turned out Tony was offside, and it caused a lot of angry reaction from Patrick Mahomes. We never really see that from him, really, him getting that angry. Probably normally because he normally wins games. But that was obviously the main talking point. Big win for the Bills, which they're creeping up on us now in that AFC seeding, AFC East especially. But what was your take on the call?
It's one of those ones, and again, if you're in the neutral and you're just for purely entertainment purposes, it was an incredible play. The heads up play by Kelsey to see him and make that decision to throw the lateral was incredible. But he was offside at the end of the day. So there's not a lot you can say. I like Mahomes going as crazy as he was. I don't think it was a good look for him, because it was clear as day that had to be called as a penalty. But it was one of those ones that, at the end of the day, the way I see it is, they called it right on the field. Yes, it was a shame because it was an incredible heads up play, but the right decision was made. I'd much rather the right call be made in that situation than what we had in I think it was in the NFC Championship game a few years ago with a missed call on was it the Rams against the Saints? I want to say.
Yeah.
Something like that, which completely spoilt the ending of that game, and ultimately it would have spoilt the ending of that one for the neutrals and certainly for the Bills. So yeah, for me, I think it's the right call. The right decision was made. I think the way Mahomes reacted to it afterwards was pretty poor from him, to be honest with you. There's an entitlement there almost, and it's quite frustrating.
I couldn't agree more. It's sadly the result of him being used to winning. It's almost like the sport child syndrome. If you tell he's 5 years, not a single playoff game on the road except a Super Bowl, which is neutral venue. He's been so used his whole career since he's been a starter to winning these games, and a lot of times he's forgotten. They've had a lot of dodgy calls. He's forgotten about the Eagles game, that dodgy call at the end on James Bradbury. And I think that I love Mahomes, I still do, but I think you're right. It wasn't a good look, and I think at the end of the day, it was the right call. He was offside, and his foot was clearly in the neutral zone. And I don't know really why he's complaining. If I'm honest with you, and I think that it's the Chiefs. For me, this result, I think this result could be the fire that they needed to light in their bodies for the rest of the season. It could inspire them, give them that sort of chip on their shoulder to go and win games. But it may well be now. I think it's going to be the case now where Mahomes, unless the Ravens go out early, he's actually going to play a playoff game on the road, which he's never done in a non-Super Bowl setting. So yeah, it's going to be interesting how he does in that. And speaking of which, interesting with the Eagles-Cowboys situation in the NFC East. The Cowboys did win on Sunday Night Football, 33-13. Second straight loss for the Eagles, a massive worry for them. But the main thing I want to talk about with you, Greg, is just narrowly beating a team as good as the Eagles. Just how legit could the Cowboys actually be this year in the season?
They've got a really tough run in. That's the one thing I looked at their schedule. They've got some really, really tough games. If they come out of those games winning the majority, then I think you can say they're certainly a contender. They've got the weapons, they've got the players. I mean, Dak is a capable quarterback, but I don't file him under elite by any stretch. So I think this year, I think the NFL as a whole I don't think the quality is as high as we've seen in previous years. So I think we could definitely see someone go on a run at the end of this year and go all the way for that reason. I think the Eagles will come back and fight back. I think eventually they'll be fine. They've had a couple of bad defeats, but they've played against the Niners, who are probably the most complete team in the league at the moment, and against the Cowboys away from home. You are going to drop games occasionally. I think they'll bounce back. They've got a much more favourable run in. But it'd be interesting to see how Dallas do if they can. I think it was 5 games left. If they can win 4 of those, I think they could go on a hell of a run this year.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's a good sign for them and a good confidence booster that they've actually beaten the Eagles now, albeit at home. They might have to play them away from home in the playoffs, but either way, yeah, there was a great result for them. Before we do go, we're asking these questions later on in the season to all our guests. First of all, Greg, your MVP vote. If you were one of the panel, who'd you vote for?
It's a good question. It's a tough one this year. And there's no quarterbacks that I would. I mean, it's always been a quarterback league, right? So, and there's no quarterbacks I would necessarily pinpoint this out to. To be honest with you, I think it's probably one of the toughest years to have it. I mean, if I'm going to go quarterback, I'd probably go Lamar. I think the way he's got the Ravens moving at the moment, I think Ravens are probably the best team in the AFC right now. Don't take that personally, but I think it's for me. I just think they are incredibly strong and they just win games. Like they dug out a win against the Rams on Sunday. Even though I don't think they were the best team on the field that day, to be honest with you. So I think I'll probably go Lamar, which is a slightly more controversial choice, I would say. I don't think many people will be voting for him, but I think he's pulled together a hell of a run with the Ravens this year.
Yeah, he has been good, but my vote actually has changed. I've had McCaffrey every week, but now I'm saying Tyreek Hill. After what I saw last night, I think it's clear to see how valuable he is to that team, and he could break that Calvin Johnson record and go 2,000 yards. Quickly as well before we go, if you had to pick your Super Bowl matchup now for February, which 2 teams are playing in it?
I think it'd be Ravens and Niners. I'd be surprised if I think they're the teams to beat in each of the conferences. I just can't see anyone beating the Ravens in the AFC at the moment. I think the Chiefs, unless they go on a run, I think the Ravens will definitely beat them, especially if they're at home. So I'd go Niners Ravens at the moment, but ask me in 2 weeks' time, it might be different.
Yeah, I mean, mine's still been Niners Chiefs ever since probably week 8. I'm sticking with that because I still think the Chiefs will go on a run and find a way in the playoffs when it matters, even if it's on the road. But that is how we'll end our podcast for today. So first of all, thank you, Greg, for coming on.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all, mate. And we will see you guys for our next episode.